Welcome back to Dark Minds, where the smiling neighbor, the polished businessman, or the quiet genius might just be the last face you ever see. Tonight, we're not talking about monsters in the shadows. We're talking about predators who hid in plain sight, men who blended into the background, who charmed their way past suspicion, who looked safe, right until the moment they weren't. One was a photographer with a smile, a man who used a camera to lure women into his orbit, and left behind a gallery of ghosts. Another wore fine suits, playing the role of a gentleman entrepreneur, while turning his workshop into a chemical graveyard. And the last, a towering figure with the mind of a genius, who picked up hitchhikers with soft words, only to unleash a storm of violence that even his own family couldn't escape. These are not stories of strangers in the night. They are stories of evil that stood right in front of us. And as you'll see, the scariest part is how normal they looked. First up is Rodney James Alcala. He was not a drifter or a loner hiding in shadows. He was out in the open, smiling, well-spoken, with a camera in hand. A predator disguised as an artist. In June 1979, 12-year-old Robin Samso set off from her Huntington Beach home on a summer afternoon. She strapped on her ballet shoes, grabbed her bike, and pedaled off to meet a friend. She never made it home. 10 days later, a park ranger discovered her skeletal remains in the foothills near Pasadena. Her parents were left to identify her from dental records. Robin wasn't Alcala's first victim, nor his last. Investigators would later tie him to dozens of disappearances stretching back to 1968. His targets were almost always women and girls, bright, trusting, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Alcala's approach was rehearsed. He posed as a professional photographer, asking to take portraits of women he encountered on beaches or sidewalks. Once lured into his orbit, he controlled everything: the location, the tempo, the silence that followed once the shutter clicked. Survivors later testified that his apartments were staged, cameras, lights, sheets, but that the session turned quickly. He strangled them into unconsciousness, then revived them, savoring the power to play God. Again and again, the cycle of suffocation and revival until life slipped out for good. Police reports described grim discoveries: half-dressed bodies dumped near highways, strangulation marks across necks, signs of sexual assault. Some were posed in grotesque ways, limbs arranged almost like mannequins, as if Alcala wanted to leave his signature for anyone who might look closely. When Alcala was finally arrested in 1979, investigators searched a storage locker he rented in Seattle. What they found was chilling: over 1,000 photographs of young women, teens, and children. Some images looked casual, others haunting, women clearly terrified. Alongside the photos, detectives found jewelry and personal items, earrings, pendants, keepsakes ripped from victims. Among them was a pair of gold ball earrings. Robin Samso's mother identified them as belonging to her daughter. That small detail tied Alcala directly to Robin's murder. Alcala represented himself in court, delivering bizarre third-person testimony, asking himself questions, then answering them. Jurors sat stunned as he tried to play lawyer, while prosecutors presented fibers, photos, and survivor testimonies. In 2010, after decades of retrials and appeals, Alcala was convicted of 5 murders in California. Investigators believe his true number could be over 100 victims. He was sentenced to death, though he never saw the execution chamber. He died of natural causes in 2021. The photographs remain in police archives, many women still unidentified. Families wonder, are their missing loved ones locked forever in Rodney Alcala's gallery of ghosts? Next is George Haigh known as the acid bath killer. This unfolded in England, 1944. The war had left shortages, but optimism was returning. People wanted to believe in stability, in investments, in men like George Haigh. Polite. Polished. A businessman who always had an opportunity to offer. Haigh preyed on wealthy acquaintances. His first known victim was William McSwan, a man whose properties Haigh coveted. Haigh bludgeoned him in a workshop, shot him, and then carried out his signature disposal method. In the back of his workshop stood steel drums. Haigh poured sulfuric acid over McSwan's body, checking periodically as the skin blistered, liquefied, and sloughed into sludge. He later described the sound as a hissing stew. Encouraged by success, Haigh repeated the process. He lured McSwan's parents under the guise of visiting their son, killed them, and dissolved their remains in the same drums. He forged signatures and stole their assets. When police finally investigated in 1949, they entered Haigh's workshop expecting to find nothing. After all, he had boasted. No body, no crime. Instead, they found a horror laboratory. Investigators ladled gray sludge from barrels, the acrid smell of acid burning their throats. Amid the muck, they discovered fragments that refused to dissolve, human fat clinging to the surface, gallstones at the bottom of the drum, and dentures floating like wreckage. Forensic scientists painstakingly sifted through the remains, placing fragments into evidence trays. The dentures, traced back to a specific dentist, became the smoking gun. Haigh admitted to at least 9 murders. His victims included close friends, families, and acquaintances, all chosen for their assets. He forged deeds, drained bank accounts, and lived comfortably off the dead. Haigh confessed freely. He seemed to revel in the details, telling detectives about his method as if it were an invention. But the courtroom saw through his arrogance. Photographs of sludge, bones, and acid containers were displayed. Jurors heard how he calmly described drinking his victim's blood, a claim historians debate as fantasy, but one that shocked the nation. On August 10, 1949, Haigh was hanged at Wandsworth Prison. The lesson he left behind: you can dissolve flesh, but you cannot dissolve evidence. Lastly, we have Edmund Kemper, known as the Co-Ed killer. This took place in California, early 1970s. Hitchhiking was part of campus life. For young women, it was cheap, fast, and common. Into this culture stepped Edmund Emil Kemper III. At 15, Kemper killed his grandparents. He shot his grandmother after an argument, then his grandfather, as he returned home. "I didn't want him to see what I'd done," Kemper later explained. Institutionalized, he manipulated psychiatrists into believing he was rehabilitated. By the age of 21, he was free. Between 1972 and 1973, Kemper picked up young female hitchhikers around Santa Cruz. His car was modified. He had removed the passenger door handle, trapping victims inside. He drove them to remote areas, where he strangled or shot them. The crime scenes shocked detectives. Bodies buried in shallow graves in woods. Others decapitated, their heads kept as trophies. Kemper admitted to having conversations with the severed heads, treating them as companions. He committed acts of necrophilia, desecrating corpses before disposing of them. The core of Kemper's rage was his mother, Clarnell Strandberg. Their relationship was toxic, filled with belittlement and control. In April 1973, Kemper finally snapped. He bludgeoned her with a hammer as she slept, then slit her throat. He decapitated her and attempted to destroy her vocal cords by shoving them down a garbage disposal. The disposal spit them back, a grotesque symbol of a voice that refused to be silenced. He then invited her best friend over and killed her too. Afterward, Kemper drove aimlessly before calling police to confess. Officers who knew him thought it was a prank. But when they arrived, they found the gruesome scene in his mother's apartment. In interviews, Kemper spoke calmly, clinically. He detailed the murders without hesitation, even reflecting on his motives. "She loved me in her way," he said of his mother. "But she had to emasculate me." Kemper was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. To this day, he remains incarcerated, one of the most infamous killers in American history. What unsettles most isn't just his crimes, but his composure. He was intelligent, articulate, polite, proof that evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Rodney Alcala, George Haigh, Edmund Kemper. 3 men who lived as predators in plain sight, slipping past suspicion not because they hid in shadows, but because they wore masks that people wanted to believe. A smiling photographer who promised to make you feel seen. A businessman in a pressed suit who spoke the language of trust. A genius with calm words and a steady hand on the steering wheel. Each of them teaches us something terrifying about human psychology. We are wired to trust what looks familiar, what feels safe. We believe confidence signals honesty, that charm is harmless, that intelligence means self-control. But Alcala turned charisma into bait. Haigh turned professionalism into camouflage. And Kemper turned intellect into a weapon. They exploited the blind spots in the way our minds read people. The truth is, evil doesn't just live in the monsters we expect. It thrives in the space between perception and reality, in the gap between who someone appears to be and what they are capable of behind closed doors. That is why their stories linger. Because they aren't just about 3 killers. They are about us, about how easily trust can be manipulated, how appearances can be a lie, and how the darkest minds rarely announce themselves. They shake our confidence not only in strangers, but in the very instincts we use to decide who is safe and who is dangerous. So the next time someone looks perfectly ordinary, perfectly polite, perfectly harmless, remember these names. Alcala, Haigh, Kemper. Behind every smile, every suit, every soft-spoken word, there might be something far darker waiting to be revealed. This is Dark Minds. Because behind every headline is a person, a story, and a tragedy that didn't have to happen. And behind every mask is a truth you may not be ready to see. Dark minds don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper.